to the point where I was remembering to push the button I was supposed to push 2 minutes early. All right, so let's proceed with the 4-way test of the things we think they are due. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial? And because I know we have at least one person in the room who is perhaps new to Rotary today, just wanted to explain that the 4-way test is kind of the shorthand Rotarians try to live by in terms of what it means to be good at standing people. So that's our 4-way test. All right, next I'd like to invite up for inspirational message, none other than Reg Lancaster.
Well, this is news to me. So usually, just speaking right now, it goes on for 15 or 20 minutes. I've cut it back to 18, but we'll do that. We'll do it. Let us pray.
We start.
Thank you, Rosa. For everybody in this room and
Engineer
families.
training.
And thank you, oh God, for lives, strengths, hopes, and for those we love, and for this gift of food. Amen.
Well, that was impromptu, then thank you very much, Reg, for being game for impromptu. I guess the minister is a good person to call on if that's the case. Thank you so much, everybody. If you haven't yet gotten your food, please feel free to do so. And we will get started with our program in just a little bit. All right. So at this point in time, we are going to have an impromptu introduction of our guest speaker. Kristen couldn't join us today, so Lynette is very kindly filling in for her to introduce our speaker.
Okay, Rotarians, I'm very pleased to present Angela Bogart to you. Bogart, I was going to put that other vowel in there. But nonetheless, Angela is a passionate advocate for helping students, helping community. As you can see by virtue of where she works, she's looking at helping adults, young people, and people who may have stopped out, dropped out, and have not learned how to read. Reading is, what they say, very cliche, fundamental. But I want you to know that she holds an MBA, and as I indicated, a great passion for addressing the challenges of people in our community. Now, I do know that one of the things that she does is that she's also in the clergy. And she's taken a major role, not only in the religious arena, but in the academic arena, in terms of the American Association of Women and Community Colleges, and then a program that I'm running, which is called Women in Education. She's making her time to help in that arena. Now, prior to joining the network, Angela served as Vice President of the Community Development for Metro Community Development, and has for over 30 years been in the management arena. And she's not only working in the public sector, but private sector. So let's welcome Angela, who is, I want to say, the quintessential advocate for those who have not. Angela, please join me.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. I wanted to just share perspective about the Flint Genesee Literacy Network, not necessarily about the nuances of it, but about the work we're doing at the network. Thank you. So I'm a kid from Flint. I'm a proud product of the Flint Community Schools. I am a proud Mott alumni. And so as I stand here today and we talk about literacy and the impact in our community, I have a bias that I bring to the space. And it is the bias of a resident. It is the bias of a woman who has 2 small grandchildren. One is 4 and one is 2. They are the love of my life. And it is in that space that I come in to talk about what we're looking at in the community when it concerns literacy. So at the Flint Genesee Literacy Network, the network was created out of a community conversation that began to emerge at Mott Community College when the prior president, Dick Schenck, heard conversations around workforce and economic development and how people were presenting as adults. At the same time, there was a dissonance happening as students were presenting at community college, and they were struggling with the text in college textbooks. So conversations began to emerge as we began to pull the thread here, and this ball of yarn began to unravel around what is going on in our community with literacy. And honestly, that thread went back to even conception, right? And the conditions in which prenatal care, how children were born, how they were developing, how they were ready for school or not ready for school, how those parents who had those children were presenting, because we know that illiteracy is generational. And it is the thing that birthed the passion that ultimately created an organization. So the Flint Genesee Literacy Network operates with Mott Community College as our fiscal sponsor and financial fiduciary. We have a vision where we envision a community where all children enter school and they're ready to learn, that they thrive and they're successful in school, that adults can earn a livable wage because low literacy rates are no longer an issue in our community. So we have, the way we approach that, we have 3 key priority areas that we need. And we use a model called collective impact. And so priority 1 for us is through collective impact. We focus on early childhood education, but we focus on that in conjunction with adult literacy. And so we have pinned and come up with this concept of 2-generational literacy. And what that means is that we're providing literacy supports to parents as they're parenting children that need those same literacy supports. So that's priority number 1. Priority number 2 is through collective impact. We are focusing in on kids entering school, entering kindergarten, and they're ready. And so what do I mean by they're ready? I mean, when you give them a book, they know to turn the book right side up, that they've had some introduction into literacy, that there's a basic foundation of words and language around text. And so we're focused on that so that when kids present, they are ready to learn. And then through collective impact, we drive and are concerned about a community-wide scalable literacy plan. And so we need a roadmap of what literacy looks like in Flint and Genesee County. So this is, in our mind, the vision of the roadmap of success. It looks a little different on this screen than it does on this one. So it looks like my road is missing. That's really weird. I've never seen it happen like that, but there is, if you can imagine, right? There's a little gray street that's going on. You can see it now. Okay, the lighting. All right. So there's a roadmap to literacy. And so whether you consider it twinkle to crinkle, right? From the time you're twinkle in your mom's eye to the time that you're older and wrinkled up, there's a pathway for literacy. We often say cradle to career, right? But all literacy doesn't stop at your career. What we know with our adult learners is most adult learners want to learn to read, not so they can get a job. Many adult learners, 60, 70 years old, they want to learn to read because they want to be able to engage with the text of their faith. So whether that's reading the Bible, reading the Quran, reading to their grandchildren, these are the things that are motivating people who are later in life to engage around reading, even if they've never been able to read as a younger person. So these are what I call the checkpoints on the roadmap of success. For us, when we think about how are we doing as a community? What does reading and literacy look like for school readiness, school success, post-secondary success? Because that could be college for some, but it could be trade for others. And then also, what does that look like when it concerns gainful employment? So we use this model, as I mentioned, called collective impact, and I wanted to give you a graphic of what that means. With collective impact, all of the arrows are aligned and we're moving in conjunction with one another. Now that's a little different than a coordinated approach, where you see everyone moving in the same direction, but without that synergy or alignment. And then at the bottom is what you see, individual impact. And we're really good at this, right? Where everyone wants to do a good thing. And so we create these programs, and sometimes they're just duplicative in nature, but we're kind of all doing our own thing in our own way. So I give you this because the network is intentional about collaboration and convening partners so that we lean in on this issue of literacy and all of those different spectrums to talk about in the early childhood arena, every provider that's touching this work. Let us put our heads together. Let's develop fidelity. Let's look at the evidence-based practices that are known to be productive, and let's lean forward together so that I'm not trying to duplicate your work, but we're able to leap off of the work that we're doing collectively. Within the collective impact realm, what that means is that there are 5 key components. And so in collective impact, you have a common agenda. Like, what do we all think is the most important thing for us to do next? How are we going to measure that thing? Item number 2. What are going to be the mutually reinforcing activities that we're working on together? And the 4th item is that we're coming to communicate continuously around these things. If we're doing something, is it working? Do we need to course correct? And then finally, the background support. So when it concerns literacy in our community, the Flint Genesee Literacy Network is the backbone support for anything that has to do with literacy. And so we're working cross-sector with partners from all across different realms, different spheres. We work with system-level partners, but we also work with a small grassroots organizations that just want to do a reading circle to be sure the kids in their church or their community are able to use those same best practices. So when you look at the life of a network has, or a coalition concerning literacy, typically has a 20-year span before they see population level impact. We're in year 8 of our network stage. And so I wanted to show this because we go from an interactional realm where we're rallying, creating awareness and advocacy, to providing some technical support with providers to really hone our practices and identify gaps, benefits in communities that need to be lifted up. And ultimately, our goal is to create a culture within our community where literacy is common because we work together in such a way that we rally support, we utilize our resources well, and we're able to have great impact. So there are many stages in this process. I'll hone in on stage 3, which is really right about where we are with full implementation, where we're providing solutions around various areas to define performance data to analyze. Ultimately, our goal is to reach scale on those items and then to be able to see those results throughout community with some commonality. Here. So the network has been setting the standards for years when it comes to this work concerning literacy. When it was created, my predecessor was really looking across the nation to say, who's already doing this in a way that we can duplicate or maybe borrow some of those practices. And in those national arenas, there was not another community that was approaching literacy with the way that Genesee County had decided to. So kudos to us. We were definitely cutting edge and above the group when it came to how we were going to approach literacy. Because of that, we've won national awards over the years because of the way that we've approached literacy in this very complex but collaborative way. And so you see some of the conferences we presented at, some of the awards we've garnered. And then most recently, you'll see, you may have heard of some of our programming this past summer where we've been popping up all over the city and distributing books. So we've done pop-up with popsicles. And we've been very intentional about ensuring that children in communities that don't normally get access to books receive those books. So we've popped up at housing commission properties and those areas that perhaps children have been disconnected from summer programming. Because we know that there's a learning loss that happens during summer. And we know that kids without books don't show up for kindergarten ready or pre-K ready to read because they've not had access. So those are some of the things that we have been focused on. When we do the work of collective impact, I wanted to show you also, we operate with a steering committee. And that steering committee allows us to sit in a space where we create a system concerning literacy. So some of the groups we're working with, like we have an adult literacy group. They're meeting only around adult literacy efforts, 2Gen groups, family-centered coaching, and early childhood. And so the network provides services to providers. So we are not a direct service provider to residents, but we are sitting in a space where we're providing technical assistance and training to those organizations where families and children are presented. So we're working closely right now with the GISD around some early childhood literacy programs, specifically leaning in on equity and how resources are provided throughout 7 different counties in Michigan. We provide technical assistance to the Choice Neighborhoods program, and we provide technical assistance to partners who just have a great idea and want to do something about reading, but they may not be in this position to have a budget to be able to contract us individually. So we're 100% grant funded or revenue generated. We're sustained by revenue generation or grant funding. And so we can step into space and work with providers who perhaps couldn't afford our costs otherwise. So we look at results, and the condition for us, the condition is the well-being of our entire population. So we're always very focused on racial equity. We want to be sure that the children, the families, and the communities we serve have access. And then we also want to be sure how we're measuring those results. So it could be a baseline of reading or comprehension. We could measure those educational gains. But one of the indicators we're really leaning in is how do parents feel empowered as their child's first and most important teacher? How do we elevate the voice of parents and the agency of parents to show up in space and to advocate for their children? So some of those results may be qualitative, but some may be quantitative as well. So our continuum of solutions, as I mentioned, this chart shows cradle to career. Across the bottom, you have like the age, and then on the top, you see these bands that show the interventions or the continuum of solutions. So quality early childhood is important. Those rich environments are important. Out of school learning time is important. Parent education is important. And then also workforce activities. So you can see across the bottom the different ages that are targeted in some of the initiatives we're working. So what we do is build capacity within our partners. And so that means we provide training, but we'll also step in and to help to analyze programs, to provide some results, research information based on how to generate the best results. And then we'll also provide technical assistance to help craft or modify program delivery. And so we are working currently, we have our last annual report, so we were working with 135 different partners over the last year. And so that partner could be in an active learning space around, let's say, early childhood, or they could be a partner that we're engaging in technical assistance that's interested in doing great work, but perhaps they don't know it. Let's get through some of this because I want to be sure we have time for questions and answers. And so when we think about advancing equity, right, and those vulnerability factors, we focus on these 4 key buckets, right? Our kindergarten readiness, our parents and children that would be age 0 to 5, Our school success target goals would be that schools with more than 50% of the children that are qualifying, and we know our community is greatly impacted by economic factors. We want to be sure that we're marketing, we're monitoring those impacts and working closely with school systems, but also closely with out-of-school programming partners. So we're working hand in hand with the CRIM Education Initiative. And then also, as we're looking at our post-secondary readiness, of course, we're working with Mount Community College, not just in post-secondary readiness, but in our workforce and economic development area. And we're also working with GSD Michigan Work. One of the quotes from one of our partners is that we're creating coherent, manageable systems based on a consistent set of principles. So everything we do is with fidelity, and that's one of the values that we bring to our partners. You see a chart here, and on the pyramid on the left-hand side, it shows the way we're engaging with partners. So we host community connection sessions, and those sessions may be sessions where we're digging in and educating around literacy or the current trends we're seeing in community. And then we go up the pyramid with those collaborative action networks. Those are work groups that are working around an issue, professional learning communities, or sometimes it's called in research communities of practice. And then again, that technical assistance I mentioned earlier. The chart on the right just kind of talks about multi-tier systems of approaches and what's average for a network. We are ahead of the trend when it comes to the network, the number of people we're working with kind of consistency. We currently have over 650 contacts with people that we've engaged in at least one of these tiers. We operate with a pretty small staff. I said we are small, but we are mighty. And I've recently restructured during the pandemic our staff structure. We are operating, you met Jessica, our entire network, our service provision in person is facilitated with the force of AmeriCorps. So we have AmeriCorps service members that take on different initiatives. And so we currently have 4. We do have an opening for a VISTA. If you know someone fabulous, we were just funded for that. And we have 2 work study students and a summer youth through Mount Community College. And then we contract and staff with consultants so that we can get that subject matter expertise at a cost that works with our budget. So when we engage with partners, we have 4 key rounds that we engage with partners. We have funding partners, learning partners, system partners, or action partners. So there's always a space and a place for people to partner with us in their area of interest. And the last thing I wanted to share, and I don't know if it'll do this, Elizabeth, but I wanted to share a recent interview I did with ABC 12. And so it's just about 2 minutes, if you guys will just bear with me. I think I might have the wrong link here. Well, I'll give you the just go ahead. So recently ABC 12 reached out and we did an interview with regard to a recent article through Michigan State University, where I'm a current student, sent a report out talking about the 3rd grade reading legislation. And the article that it was shared was really concerning because it mentioned that many of our students were at risk of being held back based on their 3rd grade reading level. So just to orient you to the importance of 3rd grade reading, up until 3rd grade, students read to learn. They learn to, up to 3rd grade, students learn to read. And then after 3rd grade, they read to learn. So it is vitally important that students learn how to read by the time they reach the 3rd grade, because what will happen is after 3rd grade, they will have a hard time keeping up if they've not already learned to read, because the foundation of education from 3rd grade on says you have to be able to read to learn the material. So there was a recent interview that I did on Channel 12 that talked about the importance of the 3rd grade reading legislation and what this means in particular to our community when we have so many children that are not proficient in that third grade reading. The concern on a deeper level is also that the children that are less proficient tend to be Black and brown children. And so we've got great concern about how children are being prepared for learning, but also how we're funding education and ensuring that those children who are economically disadvantaged are set up to win in a system where they don't show up with the books, the tools, or the resources in the way that other children do. So I wanted to share that with you. I'll send that back to you so you can send it out with the notes after the session. Back to the PowerPoint. Yep, I'll just put it there. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so just a little sneak preview of what's coming soon. The network is working on what's called a state of literacy report. We will be launching this in the fall. That lists along those 4 indicators that I mentioned, the county-wide data concerning what those outcomes look like for population, proficiency, and access. In that report, you'll see indications for school readiness, school success, post-secondary, as well as gainful employment. And each of those headers will have a page that also says what this data means, what the trends are, and what you can do about it. So look for that. It's coming this fall. And then in the winter, we'll be hosting a community connection session that's all based on the report that we're launching. And so we'd love to have you guys come and step into space with us concerning those areas that you may be most interested in, whether that's early childhood or family literacy or adult literacy. So we're looking forward to that. There's some interesting data. I won't say it's good data, but I will say it's interesting. One thing I will share with you, since the work of the network, what we know for sure is that the concern for literacy has been elevated. We've been able to define literacy to be this multimedia, this multiple mode of literacy. And so we're not just talking reading and writing, we're talking comprehension. We're talking digital literacy, health literacy, emotional literacy, and cultural literacy. So when we say we're working on literacy in community, it is all inclusive for us because we know that financial literacy is as important as reading and writing and communicating. So I'm Angela Hood. That is my time. I do want to hold space to answer any questions you may have. And I believe we have some loaded folders for you with more information about our organization and ways that you can engage with us. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
This is really that report was produced, and it's probably hard to turn out a direct service provider. But could you be more specific about where you feel your progress has been and how you go to this point?
Sure. So what we know since the network began, we have 27% more young people between the age of 3 and 4 enrolling in early education. 27% of children, 3 to 4 year olds, are enrolling in preschool or early childhood programs. So we attribute that to a couple of factors. So when we're touching a complex issue like literacy, I'm not telling you that the network did that. What I'm telling you is that the network has rallied a level of awareness and partnership that as a community, we are turning the curve in that area. And so that is a success for us. We've been able to service almost 400 people as adults who before were disengaged from learning and could not read. And so we provide a platform, an online platform. It's a software system that our adult learning centers use. And so we provide that free for them so that then they can engage with students around these materials. And the other thing I would say we've been successful at is really raising the awareness of what literacy is and why it's important. Because in our community, we know that it is multi-generational. We know that poverty is directly linked to literacy. And we also know that incarceration is directly linked to literacy. So we're working tirelessly in that effort, not just to partner with school systems, but to partner with parents and for other providers to ensure that people get the resources they need. We have a summer learning days campaign we launch every year where we provide support for summer learning. And then one of the other things we've done this year is the back to school guide to help parents as they're transitioning their youth back to school. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just telling you, I'm an immigrant. Because I'm speaking, my parents are speaking. Why did I become a nurse? Okay, it wasn't school and it wasn't any program. It was because my son, they were serious about the importance. My parents kept me in the public library every week to get books. My mother sat with me and I had to read books, comic books in English to her, and then I would translate them into Ukrainian. Okay, so it was my parents that did. So is there any reason for doing anything to push the parents that it's really them for these young children?
Absolutely.
And they don't have to know how to keep.
Yeah, I appreciate your passion. Absolutely. The number one factor, right, for literacy is parents reading at home with kids. There is no substitute for that. There is no silver bullet to answer the call of literacy, but we do know that parent engagement is the most important touch. Now, everyone doesn't have a parent that's going to read to them, right? So for us, it's also emphasizing that loving adult support may not be parental, right? It might be community, it might be family. But how do we create cultures where we're concerned enough to read to children or to expose them to literature in a way that supports them? The reading core is happening through the Crim Foundation. And so that's a way to, we have a lot of retirees that are re-engaging in volunteerism. And so I would definitely lift that up as an outlet because the issue is parents who don't know how to read don't often have the agency to advocate for the reading of their child. So there's a lot of education and emotional and social support that has to take place in those spaces. And so we're doing work around family-centered coaching to work with educators to say, how do we create spaces to engage parents as partners and as allies? Thank you for your comment. And we've got great work emerging with our ESL community too. We partner directly with the Latinx Center, and we have an Omar Center that does a lot of work with our Europe-speaking community as well. Other?
So I have a question, we also have one, and that is, so our club is part of an Area 7 Rotary initiative, actually has a literacy project where the different clubs come together to contribute funds for books to get at that book-rich environment. Do you have any suggestions about particular avenues of distribution where you're seeing that there's a real, like they would just love to have a few more books?
So yes, so in our pop-ups, we've been dropping off books, but I'm going back to the slide with the photos because I want to show you the little library, right? So we work with my Fab Lab, my fabrication laboratory, and we created these little tiny libraries, little libraries. And what we're doing is identifying literacy deserts within our community. And the goal would be, we're looking for some CDBG funding here so that we could target each ward of the city where it is the most disinvested concerning literacy. And in partnership with local businesses, we hope to support and sponsor libraries in those communities because we know we have a mobility issue too, right? So the library is fabulous. I love it. I love, Genesee District Library as well, but those are not always walkable for the families that need it the most. So we're interested in launching projects like that, where we bring the books to you. You don't have to worry about trying to build it. In addition to that, we have the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. That program is being transferred from the Flint Public Library to the Flint Genesee Literacy Network because we want to scale that program to be throughout Genesee County, not just within the city of Flint. And so that program is specifically designed for children 0 to 5, because those books get mailed directly to those kids' homes. Now, the thing is, once they turn 5, they're no longer eligible. So we're looking for what is the thing we can do, because I've raised kids, right? So I know that boys get about 9 and 10, and they don't want to read that book. They might want a comic book. They might want a book about spades or rocket ships. So how can we identify additional funding sources so that we keep reading interested? I'd love to see a pilot, a program with comic book stores, specifically for young boys, because that was the answer for my son. And I saw his reading take off when we pivoted from the local library to the comic book store. So that's just me personally. 300 for the large one, so the material cost is minimal. We're looking to partner with Habitat for Humanity or MAVE Institute for the installation. And then the maintenance would depend on the neighborhood and the response of the neighborhood, how quickly we needed to refill that little library. But minimal when you think about the impact, right? Like $1,000 a library is not. Yes, Don. So there is an active map. We've not planted them yet. We've worked up the prototype, but we haven't planted them. We're working with the GIS map folks out of U of M Flint to really look at the landscape so that we target the literacy desert, not just, you know, a great spot. Other thoughts? Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
That was absolutely terrific, Angela, and you've got my wheels turning now about how can we strengthen our connection as Rotarians to the Flint and Genesee Literacy Network. September is actually Basic Education and Literacy Month for Rotary worldwide, and so it seems like it's also a really great opportunity to highlight how can we be more intentional in working together with our local literacy efforts and stuff. So definitely feel free to send me the link to that video. I'm sure it goes out with next week's Rotary email announcement. But that also could be something that maybe I'll put your brain on or help connect you with our literacy chairperson to take their brain on. So again, thank you for that presentation. And one of the other signature initiatives for Rotary Worldwide is the effort to eradicate polio. And so with that, a contribution we made in your name towards Rotary International's efforts to eradicate polio. I want to also thank you, our Rotarians in service today. That includes Lynetta Cody stepping in to introduce our speaker, Reg Lancaster giving the inspirational message, whether it was extemporaneous or otherwise, it was much appreciated. Thank you to Joel Fike for our bulletin notes today, to Jim Richardson for the setup and takedown, and Terry Worman for, as always, staffing the registration table. I hope you'll join us again next week, where our focus on education continues. And we'll be hearing from Jason Carlisle, who is the assistant principal of the Genesee Career Institute. So today, a lot of the conversation focused on how can we support younger learners, and this is an extension of that on the other end of the childhood spectrum, where they're working primarily with high school students around vocational skills. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that next week. As always, take time to imagine Rotary, what it means for us as individuals, what it means for our club, our community, and our world. With that, we are adjourned. Enjoy your weekend.
Hi, Elizabeth.